Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. It's really great to be here, and it's great to speak with you on a topic that's very hot right now, leadership communication from an internal communications perspective. And what I'm going to challenge you to do today is actually to rethink the entire idea of what makes leadership communication effective or ineffective. The thing that we have to remember about what's going on in organizations today is that leaders are under pressure. They're under fierce pressure, they're under unrelenting pressure. And what kind of pressure are they under? The biggest source of pressure, in my view, is that they're tasked with some really high expectations. We expect them to have the inspirational skills of Winston Churchill, the conflict resolution skills of Nelson Mandela, the compassion of Mother Teresa, and the business acumen of Jeff Bezos. We could talk for hours about how to focus leaders on being more inspiring, better people, more authentic, but much of what is going on in the topic of leadership communication focuses on making leaders into better communicators, and particularly into better presenters or more virtuous individuals. And that's expressly not what I'm going to be talking about today. What I'm going to be talking about instead is turning the question on its head. Rather than pressuring leaders, giving them more pressure to be better communicators or be more authentic people, maybe we need to look at the environment into which they communicate. And for some perspective on this, I come back to a quote from George Bernard Shaw. It's a quote that I take fairly seriously. I try to live by it to the maximum extent feasible. And that is, the reasonable man adapts himself to the circumstances. The unreasonable man adapts the circumstances to himself. All progress depends on the unreasonable man. So how do we change the circumstances? In order to change the circumstances, we need to look at what the circumstances are. And what people are talking about in terms of communication at the moment is that they're talking about noise. I've been doing a lot of research lately. I've been doing a 6-part research project working with a company called Happia, which is a specialist in G Suite, Google Suite-based digital workplace solutions. And I've been working with them for the last 6 months on interviewing communicators and most recently C-suite decision makers about what they want for the future of internal communication. And the thing that the C-suite decision makers want most is that they want us to help them cut the noise down. So if we're going to look at the noise, we need to look at what's going on in the noise. And so I gave you a picture here of Dhaka, Bangladesh. Dhaka, Bangladesh has the worst traffic I've ever seen. I was there about 3-4 years ago working with a previous company of mine. But you have to also look at what's going on in that traffic. That is some of the most colorful traffic you're ever going to see. It's not just cars, it's vans, it's buses, it's taxis, it's rickshaws, and it's tuk-tuks. And they're all going to different destinations, and they've all got different contents. It looks like a mess, but there's actually a lot going on in that mess. So what's going on? What's going on in terms of organizational noise? On the one hand, you've got fear, distraction, conflicting priorities, pressure, ambiguity, and irrelevance. But that's combined with purpose, poetry, beauty, inspiration, power, and relevance. So the question is, how do you reduce the noise so that the right messages get to the right places? At a holistic level, the first thing we have to do as communicators is we need to start asking some questions. 2 questions in particular. What do we need to do and don't need to do? And what do we need to stop doing in order to reduce the noise and increase the impact? So how do we do that? You know, I said that leaders today are under pressure to be like great leaders, to be like Churchill, to be like Mandela, to be like Mother Teresa, to be like Jeff Bezos. So what do we communicators need to be like? To a certain extent, we need to be like Abraham Lincoln. Why Abraham Lincoln? Because Abraham Lincoln, believe it or not, in 1840 came up with a set of rules that, with a slight twist of interpretation, can reshape your approach to leadership communication and internal communication in organizations. Lincoln came up with these rules for political campaigns in 1840. And these 4 rules were: make a perfect list of the voters, determine with certainty whom they will support. For those who are undecided, send someone in whom they trust, and turn out the good Whigs, the good party members, on election day. Why are these rules relevant to business communication? Because these rules will actually help you avoid the most obvious and brutal mistakes that take place in the world of corporate communications. So the perfect list of the voters, the perfect list of the people in the universe that you're communicating with, will help you stop communicating indiscriminately. Determining with certainty, figuring out how people feel about the issue at hand or about their sense of priorities, will allow you to stop assuming automatic alignment and that people will do what they're told on any given occasion. Sending someone in whom they trust. One of the biggest sources of corporate communication catastrophes is when the message that has to be told ends up being told by the wrong messenger. But corporations tend to focus on the messengers the corporation trusts rather than the messengers that the people who have to adopt and adapt and deal with the information, who they trust. So having a CFO deliver a message, a tough message, may have a very different impact than having that same message come from, say, a union leader. And finally, stop mobilizing your opponents. Only mobilize your allies. This is a really clear way that people sabotage their outcomes in organizations. They exercise people who not only have nothing to do with the outcome in question, but who are actively opposed and have every interest in either resisting or outright sabotaging the outcome. So how do you get there? I do a fair amount of work with a company called Innovisor, which is a specialist in organizational network analysis. And they have determined, after working with hundreds of thousands of employees, that it's actually just 3% of employees who drive more than 80% of the conversations in any given organization. Now, the challenge is which 3% of the employees. But there are actually 2 methods of finding them. One is organizational network analysis, where you ask everybody in the organization who they go to for various different types of support, whether it's knowledge, information, encouragement, energy, expertise, or even moral guidance. The second approach, which can be done in smaller organizations, and indeed it's even possible to do this internally, is something called snowball analysis. Asking people where they go, asking people who get mentioned, and asking people, taking the people who get mentioned and asking them. And what you do is you just keep asking until the same names keep coming up over and over again. The last project I've done of this nature, it took 4 or 5 tries to start reaching a point of diminishing returns. So it's neither of these are terribly outrageously difficult. Neither is outrageously expensive, but they are requirements if you're really going to find out who the people who can drive your key conversations through an influence-based approach happen to be. And also, there's a great way not to find them. And the best way not to find them is to take the words of your managers or your HR team. Managers and HR folks tend to believe that the people who are most cooperative with them are the people who are most influential. And when you do the actual network analysis, you find that there's very little overlap between the people who managers think are influential and people who are really influential. So influencers are only 1/4 of the 4 dimensions of internal influence. The reason I give them so much feature in this conversation today is because they're the ones who are the hardest to find. They tend to get the least emphasis currently, and they're the ones who make the rest of the system work. Most organizations focus on ambassadors. And by ambassadors, I don't just mean people who represent the organization. I mean people who represent the organization in a formal way. So managers, leaders, positional leaders, they're your ambassadors. Influencers are your peer leaders. These are people who get their credibility from the people around them. You don't choose to be an influencer. Influencers are chosen by their peers. You can choose to be an advocate. You can choose to support an initiative. You can choose to participate enthusiastically. You can choose to make a difference. That makes you an advocate. It doesn't make you an ambassador, and it doesn't make you an influencer, but it can make you a very important player. And as you build up your credibility, you can move either into the influencer or ambassador space. And then one group that often gets completely forgotten from a communication strategy perspective are followers, the people who have to be asked to take part in initiatives, activities, or courses of action. But when you look at these 4 dimensions working together, you can see how you can increase the impact by reducing the noise, by reducing the number of people who get asked to participate, get asked to absorb messages, and then connect them with the other people who play these critical roles in the organization. So in closing, I would like to thank you very much for your time and attention this morning. If you would like to read more about this, I have a free book. It's called Predictably from Lincoln to LinkedIn. You can reach me at my email address, mikeklein@changingtheterms.com, or on Twitter at @changingterms. Thank you very much for your time and attention today, and thank you to H&H for putting this wonderful conference together. All the best.